So was Abraham Lincoln black? You've probably seen this photograph. Was President Abraham Lincoln black, or did he have African ancestry? The actual photograph in question is a real photograph. Now, was this merely an attempt to tarnish President Abraham Lincoln's reputation during the racially volatile Civil War period? Or was there some truth to these allegations? Maybe he didn't know, right? Social media, where fact and fiction sometimes blend so seamlessly, it's often hard to distinguish one from another. If you've scrolled through your Facebook feed at all, you may have seen this post shared, or it's made the rounds on Twitter as well, or I think it's X now. Well, at least from what I've checked, over 250,000 times on Facebook since its first appearance, from what I can trace, September 2015. The photograph is labeled Africanus, President Abraham Lincoln, 24th President of the United States. And it's an intriguing photograph that alleges to show the real Abraham Lincoln, a Lincoln that you've never seen before. But as always, there is more to the story than meets the eye. Was President Abraham Lincoln black, or did he have African ancestry? Well, intriguingly, this wasn't just a question for our modern musings. This isn't something that just suddenly popped up on Facebook in 2015. Actually, in President Lincoln's own time, some people took this question quite seriously. His critics even coined that term, Abraham Africanus, which was a label designed to either mock or unmask him. So let's dig in and figure out which one it was. So back in 1860, when Lincoln made his first foray into the political arena for presidency, it actually wasn't his race that made ripples, it was his political leanings. So he and the Republican Party, they were anti-slavery, but they weren't abolitionist. So for those who feared the end of slavery, that distinction was irrelevant, though, because they just saw Abraham Lincoln as he's going to come in and he's going to, destroy our economy. He's going to, turn things upside down. One Georgia secessionist ominously declared that, quote, under Lincoln, in 10 years or less, our children will be the slaves of Negroes. So as Lincoln's presidency evolved, so did the allegations about his race. Charles Chauncey Burr, who was one of Lincoln's biggest critics, remarked that the president should be forgiven for having, quote, natural sympathy for his own race. Political cartoons, insidious pamphlets, and fiery rhetoric came together to give him the title Abraham Africanus I. Now, was this merely an attempt to tarnish President Abraham Lincoln's reputation during the racially volatile Civil War period? Or was there some truth to these allegations? President Lincoln's hair was one of the main points of speculation during his lifetime. And the quotes about his hair kind of surprised me. So rumors about President Lincoln's racial background have persisted for a long time. Like I was saying, this photograph started circulating like September 2015, but this has been something that has been speculated on for a long time. So let's go back to one of the more interesting parts of this whole discussion, President Abraham Lincoln's appearance. Lincoln himself described his own features, saying that he had, quote, a dark complexion and, quote, coarse black hair. British journalist Edward Dicey gave a very vivid portrayal, observing Lincoln's, quote, uncombed and uncombable, lank, dark hair that stands out in every direction at once, and a few irregular blotches of black, bristly hair in the place where beard and whiskers ought to grow, unquote. The American writer Nathaniel Hawthorne, I was kind of surprised that he chimed in on this too. It's like everyone had their 2 cents on President Lincoln's appearance. He noted that Lincoln's hair was, quote, black, still unmixed with gray, stiff, somewhat bushy, and had apparently been acquainted with neither brush nor comb. Ouch. But perhaps most tantalizing is what President Lincoln chose not to reveal about himself. William Herndon, his law partner and biographer, noted that Lincoln seldom spoke of his family's history, stating that, quote, there was something about his origin that he never cared to dwell upon. Could his silence have masked his true ethnic background? Was President Lincoln hiding something in his past? I want to go back to that picture. First off, President Lincoln was the 16th president of the United States, not the 24th. The 24th was President Grover Cleveland. So this is an easy catch, but it kind of raises questions about the credibility of this image and the supposed document that's going around and the information that's being circulated. The actual photograph in question is a real photograph. It's a daguerreotype captured between 1854 and 1860. And it was part of the American Colonization Society records. It's actually the work of a photographer named Augustus Washington, an African-American daguerreotypist. I think that's the first time I've ever said that word out loud. And Washington was a man who documented many faces, and he moved from Connecticut to Liberia, but he never once photographed President Abraham Lincoln. And the man in the photograph, well, simply put, he's unidentified. And I'll leave a link below. The Library of Congress has a lot of information about this photographer's work, and you can see this exact image, and you can see a lot of other images that he did that look very similar back to President Abraham Lincoln, because even if this photograph is not him, doesn't mean that he doesn't have African ancestry, right? Did President Lincoln have African ancestry? There were some rumors that President Lincoln specifically didn't talk a lot about his mother, Nancy Hanks. And I was trying to figure out, I was thinking, well, maybe one of his descendants could take a DNA test or something like that. And I found that Abraham Lincoln has no direct descendants alive today, although he does have ancestors who are alive. Of his 4 sons that he had with Mary Todd, 3 of them died young. And his only child who survived into adulthood was Robert Todd Lincoln, and he had several children and grandchildren. However, the last of President Lincoln's direct descendants, including his great-grandson, who was named Robert Todd Lincoln Beckwith, died in 1985. So before his death, Lincoln Beckwith donated a variety of Abraham Lincoln memorabilia and documents and artwork and furniture to the state of Illinois. But with his death, the direct line to President Lincoln died as well. Did President Lincoln have African ancestry? Well, we don't know. We don't know. And I think maybe he didn't know, right? But what I can say for sure is that this photograph making the rounds is 100% absolutely not real. But that doesn't mean that the story ends here. So was Abraham Lincoln Black? Well, it's a question that I think will probably forever remain unanswered. And if you are interested in more stories about American identity and hidden history, I'll leave a playlist here for you below, and we'll talk soon.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is tramping out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He has loosed the